All right, coming back. So we want to hit a couple of bullet points before we move on to the next. Before we move on to the next kind of section, and that is, we know when we start a formula, we're looking at equal sign. You start any formula, you start typing, and it comes up, and you know you get to the. Here you get sum, you hit tab. That's important. We also know that if we're going to delete, or if we're going to create some catastrophic thing, and we hit it, we're going to get a warning box that says, hey, you can't undo this. And you want to hit cancel. You don't want to hit delete. Sometimes it's not clear. No, don't delete the box. You cancel the operation. So you think about it as the operation, we're canceling it. So there we go. All right. So now we've got some basics. We've got some shortcut keys, and the other thing is too, we're gonna load a file up there for shortcut keys, like hotkeys, like Control Alt space, Control Alt right, Control Shift up, Control Shift down, all those things. We'll put some in there. Some of those are really handy, and if you want, we can do another video with just shortcuts that are widely used, that are really helpful. I've used them a lot of times I use them. They're great. So we're going to move on now. We're going to start looking at pivot tables and charts and graphs. And and one of the things that you really have to do, like I said, if you're going to learn this, and you're going to learn it to the extent that you're building your tool belt, and you're getting better and you're getting better and you're getting better at it, you've got to spend time on it periodically, whether it's once a day. I would say once a day. Like part of the way that I learn Excel is I teach it by producing videos, and that forces me to go to Microsoft website, or go to another creator's TikTok page or YouTube page or whatever, and find out what the new functions are, find out what the new time-saving ideas are in Excel, how to use some of the formulas that are already there in multiple ways. So you have to devote a certain amount of time every day to kind of getting better, to sharpening the saw, to making sure that you're learning stuff, and then using that stuff that you know. That being said, when we go into pivot tables, doing pivot tables, and pivot tables are kind of, if you've ever been in a job search, you've seen the word pivot table 100 million times. Must be able to do pivot tables. And I'm here to tell you, 99% of the people that put that phrase in their job posting don't know how to do a pivot table themselves. But the good news is, it's really not as difficult and scary as you would think. It's intimidating when somebody puts something in a job posting that says, you must be able to do this. And so, I'm self-taught on pivot tables on the stuff that I know, but when I watch other creators' videos and I do stuff, then I see, oh, all right, yeah. There's some other neat functions that this has that I wasn't aware of. So in this case, this is a table of data. So, and I'm going to go back a little bit. So when we go back and look at this min, max, length table, this is not a table of data in the sense that Excel says it's a table of data. A table is when you can click in here, you can hit Control T, and it automatically selects this area. And down over here you see, down over here you see it says, where's the data for your table? And this dotted line is telling you where it is. Now, I don't want that number 33 to come up, so I only want my table to be in F. So then I'm going to hit that. And now if you notice, the format of it changed from what it was to look like it does in our Create a Pivot Table tab. So now you can tell this is in a table because also up here on your menu bar, you see where it says Table Design. So it's helping you design a table. So what we're going to do is we're going to hit Control-Shift right, Control-Shift down, and then we're going to go in here and we are going to go to Insert. And this is how we create a pivot table. You're going to go to Insert, left click. You're going to go to Pivot Table. You're going to left click. And by default, what Excel does, and you can see I've already done a few of them because here's this is just sheet 5 and sheet 3. It automatically creates a new tab for you at the bottom where your pivot table data and table itself will reside. But by default, you don't necessarily have to, I mean, when I'm doing it and I'm creating a table, I don't worry about any of this stuff that's in here. I just hit OK. So you hit OK, and now it takes you to this sweet page that has your pivot table field. So going back to your chart, you see fields is another name for the column where all your data lives. So this is date is a field, client is a field, project is a field, invoice number, amount, rep, all fields. So now we're going to go back to sheet 6 because I think that's where we made it. Yup. So now you see this box pops up and it says pivot table fields. So the first thing you're going to want to do is typically if you're in accounting or whatever and you've got these numbers like we put up, you're going to want to be able to slice and dice by the amount of the sale, the amount of multiple sales, what have you. So what you're going to want to do is the first thing you do is you're going to, in this box is a list of all the fields. Remember, those are the tops of the table. And you're going to click down to where it says amount. And you're going to drag that. You're going to left click, hold it down. So left click, hold it down, and drag it down into where it says values. Now if you stop right there, you know that the total of all those values in that table is 718,600,000. Now, let's say you want to break this down by year. So you're going to take the date. You're going to go back to your pivot table fields. You're going to scroll up to where it says date. You're going to left click and hold. Wait. Come on. Left click and hold. And you're going to pull that to rows. Okay, so there you go. So now we know, and you know, I wasn't going to say anything, but I am a time traveler, so I know how many sales all these people did out into the year 2027. But it's an example. Anyway, so now we know. I have an audience of one back there. Now we can see in 2023 we sold 160,000. 2024 we sold 160,000. 2025, 161, so forth down the line. So now if you want to get really cute, you can see that it's because there's this little plus sign here. That tells you that this is collapsed into that year. So you can click this. Now it shows you what you got in first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter. So you can click that again. And now it tells you what you did in each month of that year. Now, something else that you'll notice is that over here, where it shows rows, it says years, quarters, and date. So what you could do is you can take one of those from here and you can move it into this box that says columns. So I'm going to show you what happens when we do this. So you take this date and we're going to move it over here where it says columns. So now all of a sudden, it breaks each year down into the month automatically, and it gives you, and it leaves you with that grand total. So you can do that. So, but if you said, okay, well, I don't want to do that. Okay, then don't. But what if you said, I want to know what each rep sold in each year. So you could go to your field, you left click, and you pull that over into the columns. Oh. Now, this is confusing to me and I don't like it, so I'm gonna do a little formatting, and this is, you can follow along. So I would like to have these centered, and I want to move this so that they're all kind of the same size. So what I did was I go, and if you hover your mouse over the little line, the little dividing line, it turns into a double cross or double arrow, sorry. Once it does that, now if you select, let me go back, sorry. If you hover over and you have a down arrow, when you're over a column, if you click left and hold, you can select multiple columns. Then, if you have multiple columns that are adjacent to each other, you can't do columns that are in different areas of the spreadsheet. And then you get your double arrow, hold left. If you go like this, then all three of those columns become the same width. But I don't like them that big, so I'm going to hold it left and I'm going to make them smaller so that I can fit more on there so y'all can see. Hopefully y'all can see. Then, there's just so much to do here. It's fantastic what this does. So now I've got these selected. So if you wanted to center them over here, you go up here where it says alignment, and you can see kind of by the way they do this. So this button means that you're going to align it to the top of the cell, the middle of the cell, or the bottom of the cell. This is left align, center, right align. I don't even know what this does. I've never used it. Maybe I should try. Center. So now those are centered over there. Now, because we're dealing with currency, this bothers me that these don't have commas and dollar signs in them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click inside the table. So inside the pivot table that we've made, I'm going to right click, and this nifty little menu is going to come up. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to left click on number format. It's going to give me this new box, and it's going to say, oh, what kind of number do you want? You want general number? Do you want currency, accounting, date, whatever? I like currency. And the difference between currency and accounting is where the dollar sign is. I'm not kidding. So if I say currency and I hit OK, then the dollar sign is right next to the first digit of the number. Right? If I want to change it to the other one, right click, number format, it's currency. If I change it to accounting, and hopefully this doesn't make a fool out of me, yeah, now the dollar sign is at the very front of the cell. That's the difference between currency and accounting. If you wanted to round to the nearest dollar, yeah, you can go up here. Now, I don't know. Hey, stop it. Left click. Now, this is one cell, so you would have to, that answers my question. You would have to select every cell if you wanted all the decimals to be the same. Oh. Common denominator to the left, 0. Now it rounds to $1. There you go. This is a little bit about that. So now let's say, well, this is nice and everything, but I would rather have the reps in the rows and maybe something else on the columns. So we're going to say, okay, great. We're going to take this rep and we're going to move the rep over to the rows. Now, come on now. There. Okay. So now in order to see it, we have to uncollapse it, but it's there. Well, it should be there. There you go. Okay. We have to get it all the way down to the month, and it shows in what month, what rep did it. Where are all my other guys at? There we go. There's Nick Dundee, and there's Curtis, benign, and it shows them broken down by the month and all that stuff. Now, if we took this, now I'm getting creative, and now I don't even know what I'm doing. I'm guessing. And sometimes when you do this, you just got to guess. So I'm going to take these dumb quarters and years out of here. So you can left click, remove field. Oh, somebody divided by 0, the world's gone. And quarters, let me get rid of those. Oh, I completely blew it. That's not what I wanted to do. And now I'm really in trouble. Now I have to get rid of all of them and add the date back in. Now let's see what happens. Now, another important lesson. And there are a lot of different, again, there's a lot of different ins and outs of how you deal with pivot tables and how it works and everything. And so you can, a lot of times you just have to play with it. But here we go. So now, because if you look down here, rep is the first entry in this area. It starts with the rep, and then it breaks it down by the year, quarter, blah, blah, month. I don't know what CB was doing in the first quarter of 2023, but it looks like he was slacking off a little bit. So then that works. So then you go to 2024, you click that. Oh, there's JT for 2023. Okay. See, I missed that. So this box is CB. All these sales are CB down to 2027. And then it starts with JT. So there you go. Boom. Yeah, so each one of these, now one other thing, let's arrange this a certain way really quick before we do this. So I'm going to put the reps back in the columns. The years are on the left. We're going to collapse. Let's say we wanted to, in this we've got a filter. So we want to filter by the client. We put that in here. Oh, look at that. It pops up this little box up top, and this is your filter with a drop-down menu, and it says, how do you want to filter this? Well, I just want to know, I want to know about Billy Kopecky, and you hit OK. So Billy Kopecky, the only person, so JT sold Billy Kopecky 30,600. Nobody else sold Billy Kopecky anything. Now, if you were to say, I want to filter, I want to select multiple people, so I want Billy Kopecky, I want Cameron Fry, Clark Griswold, and Crash Davis, and hit OK, then we know that Kurt, John, and Nick all had sales for all of those, one or more of those people. But in order to find them, we don't know. It doesn't show who those are. But Okay, so here, this is something. So, oh, what did I do? So, if you go to any one of these cells, you land in it, and you double click it, it's going to create a brand new tab with the detail of all of those, of all the sales that were made up of that particular cell, with all the details, with every detail of every line item that made up that particular cell on your pivot table. And the way to check this to see if it's right is you go over here to amount, you select them all, you go back down here where it says 19.4, you go back to your, it was sheet 6, yep, and there it is, 19.4. So it's another trick. So you can slice and dice so many different ways. It's crazy. Now, if you and another kind of offshoot of this is if you can insert a slicer. So a slicer. Now, what I'm going to do, but before I do that, I'm going to get rid of this filter, the filter. Okay. So I'm clicked on the table. Now, what happens, now one thing I want to show you is that at some point, some of you may open up your pivot table and be like, hey, where did everything go? Well, the reason it's not showing up is because you're not selected one of the cells in the pivot table. So on, off, on. So we have these things called slicers, and the best way to explain it to you is show you what it is. So we're going to hit click, left click, insert slicer, and it's going to say, how do you want to slice this data? You want to show a date, a client, project, invoice number, amount, rep, what? So I say I want to do it by the project. I want to do it by the client. Click that, hit OK, and it brings up this. It brings this up. Now, what it's telling us is that this is only these four. So we can click this. Now it changed it. So if we click over here, we can. Oh, okay, that's what it's doing. Okay, never mind. Click, click. Oh wait. Click that. Click, 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 click. So as it keeps growing, as we keep clicking all the different reps. So another tool that there is to use to find out, to slice and dice all this data. Now we have a module set to go for charts and graphs, but you also have the option, and I am gonna rather than undo, I'm gonna select this. If these little donuts appear on here, that means you can delete it. Oh, it's gone. So what we're going to do, and notice that we changed the data once when we added the filters in, and we changed the data again when we put the slicer in, and it kept the data where it was. So in any case, we're going to go back to pivot table analyze, and we are going to go to pivot chart. This is cool. And now it shows, hey, here's a chart that it made based on your pivot table. So if we hit OK, the chart comes up and it shows, and it makes this cute little graph. And it says, and it breaks it down 2023, 2024, 25, 26, all these different years, what the sales were. JT, of course, he was the best out of all of them every year. And you know that because over here it shows it. Now, you have these drop-down menus on the chart itself. So if you wanted to leave him, if you wanted, everybody hates JT because he's always beating him in sales. So we're going to take him out of here and let's see. We just want to see what the other people did. Oh, okay, so that's what they did. But everybody loves guys with the initials JT, so we leave them in there. All right. Now we can take. Oh, that was a trip, wasn't it? And it's the same with any of these that have a drop down on them. You can filter them in or out. It's just pretty slick. And to be perfectly honest with you, this is a lot easier, than what I'm about to show you in the next section of it. So before we move on to doing charts, let's go back really quick. We're going to try to do this in a bullet point version. So to do a pivot table, the basic steps, we're gonna make sure that our data is an Excel table. We're gonna select the entire table, which we've done. We're going to go to Insert on the menu bar. We're gonna find Pivot Table. We're gonna left click it. Remember, we're going to go here. We're going to just say OK when this menu comes up, and now it started the pivot table, and now we can move our fields around to make whatever we want. So, and another bullet point: always put the amount. Not always, but if you're doing with sales or whatever, you put the amount in values, and then you want the rep and rows, and now we have a pivot table for that entire. Now we have your pivot table, and we can move things around from there, do different fun things, what have you. And it bothers me to no end that the default is not currency when it's currency in the other tab. Okay, so there you have actually. It's a pretty, that'll give you a really good foundation for working with pivot tables. And again, if you have access to this data that is bogus, so you can save this file over and over again. So you have tons and tons of bogus data. So it doesn't matter if you lose it, if you mess it up, whatever, you can just start it over. So, but you have all these buttons. What's really funny, I'm going to share a story with you, just because this is more of a classroom environment. When I've been working in spreadsheets since it was called Lotus 123 back in the 80s and 90s. And Lotus was actually, I think they were the second, and I can't remember who first came up with a spreadsheet, but Lotus was second. Who was who was first? It was like something soft, like Ubisoft or something. It was somebody that if you said the name I'd recognize.
Now you said Lotus, I remember that. That's when I first worked at.
Yeah, Lotus 123. And my first, no, I'm not going to do that. So Lotus, when I went to work in 1990, I went to work for Chevron in Bishop Ranch, San Ramon, and they had. I worked in the pricing department for the region, and all of these, and they had one PC in the entire department, and it was in one guy's cubicle, and it had Lotus 123 loaded on it, and it had like a Windows actuator. They hadn't even gone to Windows yet. No, it was Windows 3.1, if you remember that. Microsoft Windows 3.1, and that they had Lotus for Windows 3.1. And soon after that, Microsoft came out with Excel. And when Microsoft came out with Excel, we had it and we used it because we were taking these big chunks of data and we were, trying to analyze pricing and all this other stuff for Chevron. But the thing about it was, and the point I'm getting to is, I would go through, if I needed to do something, they had maybe like 4 of these, like home, insert, page layout didn't even exist. It was home, it was file, home, and like 2 or 3 other menu items. And you could go through, and if you needed to do something, you could just go through. You had enough time to click every single thing to see what it did, and then you could do it. And now you can't really do that because there's so many different buttons to push and all these other things, and sometimes you have to put one in front of the other. But if you have a bunch of data that doesn't matter if you lose it or not, then you just do it, put it together, it's fine. So you can play, the point is you can play around with a lot of this stuff and see, like here, this insert timeline. This is a fun one. And you go here and it's like, okay, 2027 doesn't show it. So this timeline, you can go through it. You can say, oh, okay, so what did we sell in July of 2024? Oh, JT sold $12,900 worth of stuff, 2024. Now, and then if you said, well, who did he sell it to? Oh, okay, double click. Boom, now we saw who we sold it to. There's that, and it comes out in the sheet. Now before long, this thing's gonna take up all the memory on the computer, and we're gonna have a big problem. So we'll stop here. But there's your long synopsis of pivot tables. The big bullet point from a personal development standpoint is you got to try this stuff, and you got to practice over and over and over. And the more you practice, the more you can get better. You can go join like message boards and all these other things. And I would tell one more story, and it's more of a parable. I don't know if it's a parable, but so there's 2 guys. It's a joke, riddle, whatever. There's 2 guys, and they both are lumberjacks, and they both start sawing logs at 8 a.m. in the morning, and they both go home at the end of the day at 5 p.m. at night. But one of the lumberjacks, every day, he takes a break around lunchtime, and he disappears. And as it turns out, this guy that takes a break saws more logs than the other guy that just works all the way through from 8 to 5. And so after a couple of months, the guy's intrigued. He's like, man, I work 1 more hour a day than you do, but you leave and disappear for an hour during the day. Where do you go? He says, oh, I go home, eat lunch, and sharpen my saw. So moral of the story is you gotta sharpen your own saw. You gotta go through and you gotta practice stuff, and you gotta try to get better at it every day. So if you don't, I have spreadsheets that I use in my line of work where I forgot how I made them, because I made them, I use them every day, but I forgot exactly how I did it. So sometimes I'll have to go, how did I make that? And I have to go back through and figure it out. If you have a basic understanding of the steps and the syntax and how things go together, you can always kind of figure stuff out. So, all right, enough chattering. Let's go on to the charts and graphs version of the show, if I can find it through all these tabs that we automatically created. So charts and graphs. So it's same basic premise to start. You've got a table of data. You're going to select it, and Control-Shift right, Control-Shift down. It's selected. Then we're going to go to data, I believe. Nope. Review. Nope. I'm blowing it here. See, even I don't know where this stuff is. Insert. Just like we did with the pivot table. Recommended charts. I know what I want usually, so I don't have to go to a recommended chart. But you can go to a recommended chart, and it'll produce a chart that Excel likes. Well, I don't like any of these. Oh, I can't stand it. Okay, so I'm going to hit cancel. That's why I don't use those, because they don't know what I want. So let's back up. I blew it here. This is a lot of data. So what we're going to do is we're going to select our date and our amount just to start. Maybe. So we're going to go through and we're going to select date. And then,
I don't have an answer for that.
oh,
Is there
I
something
wasn't
else I
talking
can
to you,
help with?
Siri. Did you guys hear me here say that word? Because I didn't. And then we're going to hit control. We have to hit control, different column. Left, and scroll to the top. So this is going to give us, so now we have date and we have amount. So we're going to go to, we can go to a line chart, which I like for these. And it shows you all the different types, and as you hover over, it shows you the different ones. Now, because I made this data and it's all kind of the same, that's what happens when you do it. So it creates this cute little pattern. And so these are, but it creates this little chart for you with all these different, axes and so forth. So you can move this over. Now, some of the other stuff you can do. So you've got this switch row column. That didn't work, so I'm going to do that. So this is a filter for the chart. So you can go through and you can say, well, I don't want all of them. I just want this date, whatever dates you want, and then hit apply, and then it'll only give you, so now it has kind of a much more different line about it than it did before. So there's a lot of different things you can do with these, but a lot of it has to do with how you have the data laid out. So in this case, because the example data has repeating numbers in it, it doesn't make for as good of an illustration. But let's say we wanted to do, add a third field, and that is the client. Oh, I blew that. You have to, so you hit control. Oh, come on now. We're gonna go down, maybe. We're gonna go down to the bottom. And we're gonna hit control. Left click and hold, scroll to the top. And then the amount, control, left click and hold, scroll to the bottom. And now we're going to do a bar chart. And we'll do it like, well, that's, yeah. Okay, actually, I wish I could. We might edit this out, but we might not. This is part of the wonderfulness of charts and graphs. But instead of that, we're going to leave the dates out. So we're just going to do the client and the amount. Control, left click up. I do a bar chart, left click. Isn't this colorful? Let's try a pie chart. Huh. This is cool. Let's try this, see if we can do that. Oh, look at all that. Wow. So, My goodness. Now, what we can do, where did it go? Chart design. So if we want to select the data, we can go through and we can take out, so we hit select data, and this menu comes out. So you can uncheck all the ones you don't want to see. Man, there's a lot. And that's going to change it. But there's still a ton of these in here. So, I'm going to go back, escape. So we're going to hit escape. I'm going to click here, and I'm going to hit delete, because I can delete that chart out of there. Charts is one of those things where you would have a set of data, and it actually works a lot better. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to sheet. Nope, that's not it. That's not it. That's not it. This is what I'm going to do. So chart is going to work better. We can take this. I'm going to delete that. I'm going to click here, but I'm going to go to insert. And I'm going to go here to a line chart. And if you look at it here, the way we just made a chart using the native chart function, but we're doing it from the data in a pivot table. And you can see how when the data is laid out a certain way, it makes a difference in how those compare, how everything compares. So because of the way the data was laid out in my examples, you're getting a lot of noise and a lot of repetition and all that stuff. So now I've come to that. We go to this table and we can see, I'm going to close that. I think hopefully we could bring it back in. Nope. Pivot table analyze. Field list. Put it away. So now we can go to this and we can see, oh, okay, this gives a more accurate representation of how these compare and line up. Better than if we had done it with a native, with the raw data. So your table, so the point I'm making is a chart is, mastering a chart means that you have to master the format of your data before you can get a really good grasp on how a chart or a graph fits together. So, this is cut different ways and all that other stuff. So you have to have a good understanding of the data and the tables and how they fit together in order to make an effective chart. And this charts and graphs are really an art form because it takes a lot more time, effort, and energy to learning, and it's trial and error. It's like, okay, this is, what do I want my graph to say? What do I want my chart to say? How do I organize the data in my table so that when I select it all and I create a chart, it looks the way I want it to look. So, and you saw just now by when if you look at this chart is somewhat, this chart is somewhat intuitive based on the data that we have, the way my table's laid out. But if you go back to the raw data, I went the wrong way again. And you look at it, this is just the raw data. So every time this Erwin Fletcher shows up, because he shows up multiple times, we saw when we made the chart over here, what happens is each instance of Erwin Fletcher had its own slice of the pie. Because this data is raw, it hasn't been consolidated into a format that can be used to create an effective chart or graph. So So with that, I'm gonna review the big rocks of charts and graphs, and that is, this is really easy. It's good organization of your raw data into a pivot table or into just a regular table. Which, doing that manually, you saw how pivot table works. It's much easier. It's actually much easier to put it into a pivot table and then create a graph from there, a chart or a graph from there, because it's doing all that analyzing for you. So it's the analyzing of and grouping of your data that's effective, and then it is understanding how the more of the basic operations of which pieces you want to actually be on which axis and which line and where you want the line to be and things of that nature. So not as much in depth. Like I said, and the biggest piece, it's trial and error. You got to keep trying over and over again until you get it right. So that's about it. We're going to, well, if you're seeing this, you already know when it posted. So I'm not going to tell you when we're going to post it because it'd be like a paradox of time. So, but if you have questions, we're online, and we're checking messages and things of that nature up until the 2nd of May. So there's a few days, 5 or 6 days left to do that. And you can email me straight through Canvas, and I can put together if you have questions or specific questions, or if you want to share something that you learned you think I may not know, especially about charts and graphs, then you can absolutely send me that note too. So thanks for watching. Remember to keep your eye out for our next session as we're going, and if you have more broad recommendations or needs or wants about the class, the structure, how it would be more beneficial for you to, from a participation standpoint, how we can tweak that, anything that you can tell us to make the class better for you guys to learn more, please let us know that too. We want to grow this part of DVC into something that's going to really help people in the business community. That's going to help people get back into the workforce. It's going to help people that need to get better skills so they can get better jobs, so they can have a better life. So that's what we're about. I hope that you can share some feedback with us about how to get better on our end too. So thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.